오늘은 JP모건 CEO 제이미 디먼의 실제 인터뷰를 바탕으로 부, 경력, 리더십에 대한 진짜 인사이트를 전해드립니다.
Goldman is basically pay me a lot more, but more important than that is you get a lot more experience. And I thought, why would I give up, great experience at Goldman and higher pay? And then he called me back. I'd become a Baker Scholar at Harvard Business School, which was important to him. He likes that kind of stature and status, which is the top 3 or 4% of the kids at the school. And he said, you know what? I just sold the company here to American Express. He was very down to earth back then. I don't remember if you knew him way back then. Yeah. And American Express was more of a bureaucratic, company. They said, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I would love to have you here as my assistant. You'll learn a lot. You'll see a lot. You can always go back to Wall Street. And that really intrigued me because I'd really never seen a big corporation. He was very different than corporate America. He's more like a Jack Welch type at the time. And I did figure, if it didn't work out, I could always go back to Wall Street or something. So my interest was in building something. It wasn't necessarily being an investment banker. And he had built Shearson, Hayden, Stone. And then he had these big dreams about what might happen to the American Express and financial services. So I took the crapshoot and joined him for a lot less pay. But I didn't really care that much about that. I really cared about the experience.
Tell us a story about where you think you picked up and gleaned the biggest insight you learned from Sandy Weill.
I go to American Express. He wasn't the president. He became the president shortly after that. He was down to earth. He worked all the time for the company. I mean, he'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner, selling, buying, hiring, recruiting. I always thinking about mergers, always what we can buy. So like a lot of the mergers we did over the next 20 years were because relationships he had built up over a long period of time. He hated the bureaucracy at American Express. One of the things that we all learn in life is when you work at certain types of things you don't like, you also learn very good things what not to do. They were hugely bureaucratic. They had the board, everyone prepared for the board meeting. And then they had the pre-board prep and the pre-board prep. It took every month. Bob Lipp hated that stuff. A lot of the big banks had it. It was just bureaucratic, a lot of politics inside, and people didn't share information and who's up and who's down. And internally, it was less of a meritocracy, more of a who do you know and where did you go to school, at least early on. He just hated all that stuff. In fact, Bob Lipp, of course, you may remember, when we got to Travelers, when he joined us at Commercial Credit, you couldn't make a presentation to the board with a PowerPoint. He just said, we're not doing it. And you're not prepared. So I've never prepared a presentation for the board, ever. I've done it for big deals we did and stuff like that. So Sandy was always hustling that stuff. Always wanted to know the facts and the bureaucracy, and was a fanatic about expenses and growing. We bought Lehman when we were there. He's always out with the salespeople, shaking hands, doing the dinners. You have a lot of CEOs who just wouldn't do that. They're too busy to actually hang out with their own people. So you learn all those lessons.
Do you think leadership has evolved in terms of what really makes a leader today versus in those days? Do you see a difference?
There is definitely a difference. When you ask questions like that, I always think about what is the same and what changed. So let me just do what's the same, okay? Because I think you got to be very careful about it. Like it's totally different. I think in all these things, like Andy Pearson was one of the great CEOs of all time. He was Jack Welch before Jack Welch. The mind power, the analytics, the detail, the repeat, the rinse, to go out to the store, to observe what's going on, to listen to people, to do it again, branch by branch, product by product, service by service. A lot of companies don't do that. And then even politics inside a company stops a full undressing of your own performance. Like, how are we actually doing? If you're in Pizza Hut, not why is just Taco Bell maybe doing better, but why is McDonald's doing better? This company overseas doing better. And if you don't do that, it's very hard to become a great company. So I don't think that's changed. I think some companies rely too much on outside advisors and all that. Another thing that has not changed is, I'm going to say, great administration. You look at, and you've seen it, where some people who run companies, they're a hot mess. People don't know what their jobs are. Meetings don't start on time. They don't return their phone calls. They're too busy. And I've used as an example, a military example, but Ike Eisenhower, during Normandy and D-Day, 150,000 troops, 7,000 ships, hundreds of aircraft, 30,000 paratroopers, food, guns, bullets, timing, planning. You got to run stuff. So you may not be the greatest analyst in the world, but you got to run it. And the people have to know what their jobs are and how you're doing it. And the last part's changed a bit. And I think it's the most important part. When I started working, there was a lot of the pounding the table, the politics. But I think what really makes a great leader is this part, which is heart and curiosity. You use recognition. Heart is you actually give a damn. It makes you authentic. You're not trying to be perfect. You make lots of mistakes, but they see, people know you are or they aren't, how you treat people, what you say, you do what you say, you follow up. You've all seen the BSers out there. People, they think they're getting away with it. They generally aren't. People don't want to work for those people. And you can read all these leaders, whether it's military or history or business, you earn trust and respect. You earn it by every day showing showing that you're going to work as hard as they do, you care as much. You're trying to do the right thing. You're not trying to be right. You're the first person to say, I made a mistake. You're the first person to share credit. You're not the first person to blame the other person, hang people high, make an example.